There are moments in human history when heaven breathes into the fabric of time and nothing is ever the same again. Not because a nation rose or an empire fell, but because the unseen world pressed its lips against the seen and whispered a truth too holy for language. This story, of wind and flame, of trembling voices and awakened hearts, begins not in a cathedral or among kings, but in an upper room, hidden away from the noise of empire. And it begins with waiting. 50 days of it. 50 days of silence after the resurrection, of questions echoing in the soul, of eyes lifted to a sky that had swallowed the one they loved. And then, the fire fell. Stay with me to the end of this journey, because the story you think you know about Pentecost is not merely a tale of ancient tongues or doves in stained glass windows. It is the story of how time burns open, how spirit invades the ordinary, how the breath of God rearranges the destiny of those who dare to listen. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, take a moment to do that now, because this is not just a video, it's an initiation, a calling into remembrance. To understand Pentecost, Pinksteren, as it's sung across the Netherlands, we must first understand its strangeness. It sits quietly in the calendar, often overshadowed by Easter's grandeur or Christmas's glowing warmth. And yet, it is Pentecost that holds the spiritual ignition key to both. It is not the beginning, but the activation. Not the event, but the explosion that makes everything after it possible. Easter is the empty tomb. Pentecost is the burning heart. In Acts chapter 2, the curtain is lifted. The disciples are gathered in one place, fearful, prayerful, uncertain. Then, a sound like a violent rushing wind tears through the room, and tongues of fire appear, resting on each of them. They speak in other languages. But what truly happens is something deeper. The divine breath that hovered over the chaos in Genesis now enters human lungs. The spirit that animated the prophets now dances on fishermen's heads. It is no longer God with us. It is God in us. Pentecost is not just the descent of the Holy Spirit. It is the cosmic declaration that humanity has become the new burning bush, mortal vessels lit with eternal flame. And still, we ask, why 50 days? In Jewish tradition, Pentecost, known as Shavuot, was the Feast of Weeks, a harvest celebration that came 7 weeks after Passover. But hidden within that timing is something more sacred, a divine countdown. From the moment of liberation, Passover, Easter, to the moment of revelation, Shavuot to Pentecost, a journey unfolds, not just through days, but through inner landscapes. 50 days to shed the skins of slavery. 50 days to realign the soul. 50 days to prepare the vessel. It's as if the universe was counting, breath held, for the precise moment when the human heart was ready to hold fire without being consumed. And in the Netherlands, where Pinksteren stretches across 2 days, there's an echo of this deepening. Day 1, celebration. Day 2, contemplation. As though the Spirit does not descend all at once, but in waves. As though awakening comes in layers, each one pulling us further out of sleep and closer to the flame that knows our name. Pinksteren is not just a holiday. It is a mystery encoded in time. But Pentecost was never meant to remain a historical relic, sealed in parchment and theology. It is a living pulse, a cosmic rhythm, a spiritual phenomenon still rippling through centuries, searching for hearts bold enough to become altars. For Pentecost is not only what happened, it is what happens every time we dare to wait, to listen, to open ourselves to a spirit that cannot be domesticated. It is the mystery of transformation, from fear to boldness, from silence to speech, from ordinary to miraculous. As we begin this exploration, 50 days to fire, we will not simply recount the scriptures. We will peel back the veil. We will journey through themes of breath, flame, time, waiting, revelation, and embodiment. We will see how this ancient moment mirrors the architecture of spiritual awakening in our lives today, and we will uncover the symbolic narratives embedded in Pentecost that still speak across language, across history, across dimension. The Spirit that fell on that day did not fall once. It falls still. It waits for rooms like yours. It searches for hearts tuned to wonder, and it descends not always in fire, but in intuition, in dreams, in sudden awakenings, in the quiet knowing that something more is possible. So take a deep breath. This is no ordinary tale. It is a firewalk through mystery. It is a descent into the very mechanics of awakening. We will begin where the apostles once sat, in stillness, in unknowing, in anticipation of something greater. To speak of Pentecost is to step into the delicate architecture of divine timing, where the spiritual and the physical intersect, like two flames touching but never consuming each other. It is not merely an event, it is a revelation encoded into the very laws of transformation. Behind the drama of rushing wind and flickering tongues lies a template, an archetype, for spiritual rebirth that has echoed through cultures, timelines, and soul awakenings long before and long after Acts chapter 2 was penned. At its core, Pentecost is about the infusion of spirit into form. It is the soul's ignition. Imagine a body carved from dust, still and perfect in structure, but lifeless until breath enters its nostrils. That breath is not oxygen, it is essence. It is the code of divinity breaking into matter. And that is what happens again at Pentecost, not to one, but to many. It is creation, version 2. And this time, the fire doesn't just animate, it activates. To wait 50 days is not arbitrary. It reflects the slow rhythm of the soul coming into alignment. Like the moon cycling through phases, or the earth rotating toward a solstice, something profound is being prepared in the silence. Pentecost whispers the truth that there is no shortcut to divine readiness. Just as a seed cannot rush the sun or a womb cannot rush the birth, the fire does not fall until the soul is ripe. This is not a punishment, it is a pattern. It is the sacred patience built into all real transformation. This waiting period also dismantles illusion. It strips away the emotional afterglow of Easter, the victory of resurrection, and challenges the disciples and us to sit in uncertainty. After all, they saw the risen Christ, watched him ascend, and yet still waited. Why? Because awakening is not a single flash of insight. It is a layering of truths that arrive when you are finally still enough to hear them. And that waiting, that anticipation, is a core theme that touches all of us. Whether in seasons of grief, transition, prayer, or rebirth, Pentecost teaches that spirit comes not in the moment of excitement, but in the moment of surrender. When the Spirit does fall, it does so with radical inclusivity. The text says, "They began speaking in other tongues," and that people from every nation under heaven heard the message in their own language. This is not a miracle of speaking, it is a miracle of understanding. The fire of Spirit does not burn to divide, it burns to unify. Pentecost dismantles the Tower of Babel's confusion and replaces it with divine harmony. What once was scattered now speaks as one. And yet, there's more than just unity here. There is transformation of identity. Fishermen become orators. The timid become prophets. The room, once filled with hiddenness and fear, becomes the launchpad of a spiritual revolution. This is no minor detail. It tells us that Spirit does not come to decorate our lives, it comes to overturn them. It does not politely ask to be included in our schedule. It sets fire to everything that is false, so only what is eternal remains. Another core theme within Pentecost is the concept of the upper room. This place is symbolic. not just geographical. It is the higher state of consciousness, the spiritual elevation one must reach to be ready for the descent of spirit. It is the place where noise falls away and ego is disarmed. The upper room is a mirror of your own inward sanctuary, the space you must climb to within yourself where the noise of the world cannot enter. And it is there, in that quiet altitude, that the divine arrives, not with chaos, but with clarity wrapped in flame. The Holy Spirit, as presented in Pentecost, is not a distant deity nor a vague mystical force. It is the animating pulse of divine intelligence moving through the human form. It is the third movement of a symphony that begins with creation, continues through redemption, and culminates in embodiment. What was once around us, God in clouds, God in temples, is now within us, not metaphorically, but literally. The very breath we draw becomes the carrier of divine frequency. In this way, Pentecost is a profound reversal of spiritual hierarchy. No longer is God only for prophets, priests, or kings. Now, the Spirit rests on all flesh, sons, daughters, old men, servants. The message is clear. There is no elite in the kingdom of flame. There are only those who say yes. And this is not theology. This is transformation mechanics. It is universal law. When the soul empties itself, spirit pours in. And here is the quiet paradox. Though it is described as a mighty rushing wind and tongues of fire, the spirit itself is invisible, formless, untouchable. Pentecost, then, is the revelation that the most powerful force in the universe is the one you cannot see, but you can feel it shift your entire being. It is the same paradox that governs life itself. Gravity, breath, love, thought, none are visible, yet all govern reality. So let us understand Pentecost not as a static story in sacred text, but as a blueprint, a code embedded in the spiritual DNA of the universe. It is the map of how awakening descends, through waiting, through stillness, through inner elevation, and then through fire. And that fire doesn't only come once a year. It waits always just outside the door of our awareness, asking only that we create space for it to enter. Every sacred story, if stared into long enough, reveals itself as a mirror. Pentecost is no exception. Beneath its historical framework lies a tapestry of symbols, archetypes woven into fire, wind, and voice, that speak not only of what happened then, but what is happening now in the soul of anyone standing at the threshold of transformation. We begin with the upper room, a space that at first seems like mere setting, but is, in truth, the womb of spiritual rebirth. It is where the disciples waited, but also where something new was gestating. Picture it, not just a physical room above the street-level noise of Jerusalem, but a plane of consciousness above fear, above ego, above distraction. The upper room is every moment when the soul withdraws from the clamor of the world and climbs into solitude, not to escape, but to prepare. Just as Moses climbed Sinai, just as Jesus withdrew to the wilderness, so must each soul ascend its inner staircase. Pentecost does not fall in the marketplace. It falls where there is emptiness, where the room has been cleared. Then comes the wind. A sound like a violent rushing wind fills the room. Wind, in the language of spirit, is breath. It is ruach in Hebrew, pneuma in Greek, both meaning spirit or breath. This wind is not a casual breeze. It is a tempest of change, a tearing open of the veil. Think of a life moment when everything shifts in an instant, where the familiar dissolves and you stand in the raw clarity of truth. That is the wind of Pentecost. It is the divine exhale that breaks stagnation. It is what arrives when Spirit says, "Now." And then, the fire. Not fire that destroys, but fire that descends, measured, intentional, and deeply symbolic. Tongues of flame rest upon each person, not consuming them, but crowning them. This is the fire of the burning bush, the fire that led the Israelites through the night, the fire that now falls not on altars of stone, but on the living temples of the human body. Fire has always symbolized purification, illumination, and transformation. But here, it is deeply personal. Each flame is separate, yet from one source. This is not a wildfire. This is spiritual fingerprinting. To be marked by fire is to be claimed by purpose. Consider the tongues, the spontaneous languages that flow from their mouths. Some see this as a miracle of communication, others as divine madness. But the symbolism is far more layered. These tongues are not just about speech, they are about voice. The Spirit gives them a voice that is not theirs, yet is more truly theirs than anything they've ever spoken. For the first time, the divine is not speaking to them, it is speaking through them. And this is the paradox of all spiritual expression. When you are most surrendered, your voice becomes most powerful. There is a parallel here to the Tower of Babel, where humanity, in its pride, tried to ascend into heaven by its own strength. God scattered their languages as a form of division. But at Pentecost, that fragmentation is reversed. People from every nation hear the same truth in their own tongue. The Spirit unifies not by forcing sameness, but by illuminating the divine through diversity. The message is clear. The divine speaks in every language, but we must be tuned inwardly to recognize the voice. Then there is the crowd, bewildered, skeptical, divided. Some marvel, others mock. They are drunk, they say. And isn't that always the reaction to the truly awakened soul? Those who carry fire are often mistaken for mad, because the world recognizes reason, but not revelation. Pentecost is not just the descent of fire, it is the unveiling of how the world treats fire-bearers, with wonder or with ridicule. And that becomes a choice for every viewer, every seeker, to dismiss what they do not understand, or to lean in, curious, humbled, open. But perhaps the deepest symbolic thread lies in the number itself. 50. 50 is the number of freedom and fullness. In Jewish tradition, every 50th year was the year of Jubilee, a time when debts were forgiven, slaves set free, land returned. Pentecost, then, is Jubilee of the Spirit. It is the emancipation of the soul from limitation. It is not just the birthday of the Church, it is the unshackling of human potential. After 50 days of waiting, what is received is not doctrine, it is power, and not power to dominate, but to serve, to heal, to speak truth in a fractured world. These symbols, upper room, wind, fire, tongues, crowd, and number, are not locked in the past. They are living metaphors for the inner journey. The upper room is meditation. The wind is divine insight. The fire is the call that cannot be ignored. The tongues are the alignment of voice with spirit. The crowd is the world's reaction. And the number 50 is the passage through waiting into revelation. And so, Pentecost becomes not just a tale to be remembered, but a lens to see your own path. Where is your upper room? Where are you being asked to wait, to empty, to make space? What fire has already touched your life, though you've tried to explain it away? When did wind rush through your plans and leave clarity in its wake? Where have you spoken with a voice not entirely your own, and known it as truth? And finally, are you willing to bear the weight of fire, knowing it will not make you popular, but it will make you whole? These are not idle questions, they are portals, because Pentecost does not only belong to the apostles, it belongs to all who dare to receive. The Spirit still hovers, still waits, still speaks, if we have ears to hear. To speak of wind and flame is stirring, To sit in the glow of sacred mystery is intoxicating, but no fire is given for spectacle alone. Pentecost was never meant to be confined to upper rooms or liturgies. Its purpose was, and remains, transformation in motion. The fire fell not to burn within, but to burn through, to set in motion a new kind of living. If the descent of the Spirit is cosmic, its implications are utterly human. It rewires the internal world so that the external one cannot help but change. The question, then, is not whether the Spirit fell, it is whether it falls in us. And if so, how then shall we live? First, we must return to the silence of the 50-day wait, because it teaches us that sacred fire does not arrive on our schedule. In a world addicted to speed and immediacy, Pentecost whispers the discipline of divine timing. It asks us to trust the unfolding, to allow emptiness to be part of the journey. Real integration begins when we stop demanding revelation and start becoming available to it. The modern soul is often too full to catch flame. To live Pentecost daily is to make waiting not a void, but an altar. From that altar, we move into the world differently. The first shift is in our relationship to voice. Pentecost is, at its heart, the birth of sacred speech. The apostles speak, and something changes in the air. People hear truth in their own language, not just linguistically, but spiritually. And so the call for us is not just to speak more, but to speak from fire, to let our words carry weight, because they've been purified by silence. In a noisy culture, to carry Pentecost means to carry resonance, to speak only when the Spirit speaks through you. And that can happen in sermons or in quiet moments with a friend. It can happen in boardrooms, at dinner tables, in subway cars. Sacred speech is not about volume, it is about vibration. But voice is only part of it. The Spirit also brings boldness. The Peter we see after Pentecost is not the same man who denied Christ 3 times. This Peter stands in the streets, unshaken by mockery, and declares a truth that could cost him everything. Pentecost equips the soul with a courage not based in ego, but in alignment. It is the fire that makes fear irrelevant. So to live the Pentecostal life is to allow Spirit-led boldness to guide our action. It means standing for justice when it's uncomfortable, speaking truth in systems built on silence, loving radically when the world demands retreat. Another hallmark of a Spirit-infused life is unity without uniformity. The miracle of Pentecost is not that everyone became the same, but that their diversity was no longer a barrier to connection. This speaks volumes in an age fractured by tribalism and ideological warfare. Pentecost offers a way of being where difference is not erased, but harmonized. To embody this today means learning to see the divine in the other, to practice empathy over ideology, and to welcome mystery where the mind demands certainty. It means creating spaces, in families, in workplaces, in communities, where the flame of Spirit can land on every head, not just the ones we agree with. And then there is the practical alchemy of transformation. Fire transforms whatever it touches. It purifies, illuminates, refines. A life touched by Spirit must be willing to undergo this same refining. Old ways of being will burn. False identities will melt. Attachments that once felt essential will evaporate in the heat of deeper truth. And this is not always romantic. Sometimes the Spirit does not arrive as ecstasy, but as disruption. It may shatter routines, pull relationships apart, or force us to confront shadows we've long avoided. But this, too, is love. The fierce love of a flame that refuses to let us live half-lit lives. Living Pentecost means becoming mobile temples, carriers of presence, not perfection. It is a daily willingness to say, I do not know where this fire will lead, but I trust the one who sent it. This surrender is the ultimate practicality. It means releasing control not as a weakness, but as a strength. It means holding plans loosely, relationships gently, and purpose fiercely. It means stepping into the unknown not with anxiety, but with wonder. In the Netherlands and throughout Europe, where Pinksteren unfolds over 2 days, the first for celebration, the second for reflection, there lies a model for this dual rhythm. Celebration without integration is noise. Integration without joy is heaviness. But together, they create a spiritual life that is both grounded and alive. Perhaps the modern world needs not just more celebrations of spirit, but more Mondays of quiet reflection, where we ask, now that the fire has fallen, what in me must change? The final implication is that the Pentecostal flame is not exclusive. It is not reserved for clergy, mystics, or the spiritually elite. It is poured out on all flesh, young and old, male and female, servant and free. This radical accessibility is perhaps its most revolutionary quality. It democratizes the sacred. It breaks the hierarchy of holiness. And it challenges each of us, in whatever corner of life we inhabit, to receive and respond. So we return to the beginning, not with answers, but with ignition. The story of Pentecost is not behind us. It is ahead of us, waiting to be lived. The fire still falls, the wind still moves, the Spirit still speaks, and the question still lingers in every heart that dares to open. What must I now do with this flame? There are thresholds in every life, moments not marked by the turning of clocks, but by the turning of the soul. These moments do not always arrive with trumpets. Often they come disguised, as whispers, as waiting, as silence, as a fire you did not ask for but cannot ignore. Pentecost is one of these thresholds, not a single day, but a spiritual turning point etched into the universal rhythm. And if you've listened this far, then you, too, may be standing on the edge of flame. Let us now gather what has been revealed. We began in stillness, in that hidden upper room of the heart, where the unknown stretches long and wide, and faith becomes the only map. We sat with the apostles in their waiting, in their questions, in their holy disorientation after the resurrection. And then we saw the descent, not of doctrine or law, but of spirit. Not a scroll, but a wind. Not a sword, but a flame. It came to interrupt, to awaken, to transform. And in its falling, something dormant in humanity was called to rise. We traced the symbols, the upper room as the realm of inner elevation, the wind as divine breath, the fire as purification, the tongues as alignment with divine voice. We saw that Pentecost is not only a story of the past, but a spiritual mirror reflecting back the image of our own readiness. The Spirit is not waiting for a calendar date, it is waiting for an opening. The story of Pentecost has always been twofold: divine descent and human response. The fire falls, but what will you do with it? This is the transformation now asked of us. First, we are called to listen, not just with ears, but with hearts stripped of distraction. The Spirit does not compete with noise. It moves like breath, like intuition, like the hush before the dawn. It needs a room emptied of certainty. It needs a soul willing to be rearranged. Then, we are called to speak, not as echo chambers of culture or fear, but as vessels of clarity and courage. The flame that touched each head in Acts was not ornamental, it was commissioning. It gave the power to speak in new ways, with new understanding, across the fault lines of identity, race, language, and tribe. Your voice, refined in fire, becomes a bridge where once there were only barriers. We are also called to carry, not just words, not just insight, but presence. Pentecost does not turn us into scholars, It turns us into living temples. Wherever you walk, the fire walks with you. You become the meeting place between heaven and earth. And this requires deep humility. For no one owns the spirit, no one commands the wind, but we can surrender to it. We can let it shape us, burn us, send us. And finally, we are called to remember, to root ourselves in the eternal rhythm that has always undergirded awakening. 50 days of waiting, one sudden descent, a lifetime of transformation. This is the pattern. It is as old as Genesis, as present as breath, as personal as the inner stirrings you may be feeling now. This is not myth. It is not metaphor alone. The fire still falls. The Spirit still descends. Pentecost is not a museum exhibit. It is a current moving through the world, looking for souls willing to ignite. So the question rises once more, no longer from a pulpit, no longer from an upper room, but from within you. Are you ready to receive the fire? Not the fire that flatters, but the fire that refines. Not the fire that entertains, but the fire that transforms. Not the fire of performance, but the fire of purpose. To live. Pentecost is not to visit the Spirit once a year. It is to host it daily. To become a walking sanctuary. To burn in quiet, in love, in truth, in sacred boldness. And if you've come this far, perhaps you already feel the flicker. Perhaps something ancient and intimate has stirred within you, reminding you that you, too, were made for flame. So take this story, carry it beyond the screen. Let it shape your silence. Let it empower your speech. Let it change how you wait, how you pray, how you see every stranger as a future flame bearer. The Spirit is not done falling, and you are not done rising. This is your Pentecost. This is your fire. Let it burn.